Hello everyone. This is episode 2 of podcast series by BL Inside Circle. Today we have with us Mr. Vikram Poddar, India's number one corporate stand-up comic star, who has had a very interesting journey, right from consulting to investment banking to comedy. It's he calls himself as India's humor resource manager. So let's start with him. And our first question to you, or our first doubt, which everybody will have, is how did this happen? I know you love telling the story about you getting laid off in 2009, but that's just one part of it. Why did you choose just comedy? Why did you not choose something else? And how did this switch to corporate to comedy happen?
Yeah, I would not say as much as I. It's like sometimes certain things choose you also as much as you choose them. I guess it's that as well, and also I would say a combination of certain circumstances in life, in which, well, you say that everything is comedy eventually, right? So I guess the natural place where it would have gone is that. But I see from your expressions these esoteric answers. बोला ये सर MBA क्लास में हम सुनते हैं हमारे साथ नहीं चलेगा स्पेसिफिक बताइए मुझे दिख रहा है so so I'll be very honest, it's a little hard for me to explain that without getting into the full context of everything that's gone down in my life, which I think would be a bit much for your viewers also. So I don't want them to get flooded with too many things. See, I can say it's blocks here. You do one thing, it leads to another, it leads to another. So as you mentioned yourself, yes, I do like to mention that story a lot about getting laid off and performing at the same place. I did not realize it is something significant, to be very honest. The first time I mentioned this was at a storytelling event, actually, with Taper Tail Kahaniya. It's a storytelling platform. I think it is possibly India's biggest platform. And I was doing my story there about getting dumped, which is essentially getting dumped by my employer. And stage पे मैंने ऐसे ही casually I said it as a very matter of fact thing, that 6 years later I performed at the same company I got laid off from, and there was an applause and cheer from the crowd for what reason I honestly was not able to fathom. मैं बोला ठीक है ये तो expect नहीं कर रहे थे. So I figured, okay, there's something significant for people in that story. I don't know whether it's redemption or some people feel, okay, it's a way of getting revenge. I can tell you that is not the case, because I've performed at other companies also that I've worked with. सारे से lay off नहीं हुआ है, कुछ में मतलब voluntary exit भी हुआ है, ऐसी बात नहीं है. लेकिन वहाँ पे भी यार शो जब मैंने किया, I'll tell you there was no arrogance or anything कि मैं swag से वापस आ रहा हूँ. There was nothing of the sort. To be very honest, the show went fantastic. I wish the promoter of the company had already sold. I wish he had been there because some of the jokes would have been really nice, would have connected. And I'll be honest, when I was working there, I had challenges working with him. He also had challenges with me. But when I started doing this, he himself reached out and, he had his own styles. Like, I learned a lot about sales also from him. He's like, son, I'm so proud of what you're doing and this and that. And then I met him a couple of times, as a mentor. And, as equals also we've chatted, where he's like, tell me how these young people think, man. I want to connect with my children. You tell me what these people are thinking, what type ka. It was a very so I would not say that your relationship becomes adverse. I think it just changes sometimes in a very positive fashion. The person who laid me off, in fact, is the person who reached out 6 years later to do an organizational transformational project for a client. He is part of Big Four, and he said another Big Four is partnering with a theater company to pitch a human, transformation HR project. We want to partner with BoredRoom Comedy to win the project. So it was like Big Four would have had the chance to win an engagement because of being aligned, we could not take it to its full conclusion. But for me, the fact that he reached out, had that idea, I'm like, that's enough. What other redemption do you need, essentially? So, I mean, that's what my experience has been from that. And from there, I went to Toastmasters because I was free. I had time on hand, essentially. And in Toastmasters, there was a friend, people saw and so dekha ki this person also comes from he's seen challenges in life, he's also seen challenges, and we sort of made a list, like we realized that we are people who want to do things in life, and we sort of made a bucket list in 2010, which had all sort of things like he wanted to travel the world. He did that, he actually made his living almost doing that for a good year. He said he wanted to learn salsa. He learned salsa. I said I wanted to learn stand-up comedy and make it a living. That time it was just a distant dream. ऐसा सोचा नहीं था यार, frankly. It's just an item that was put down. He also said he wanted to date a gorgeous young woman. He did. The outcome वो तो चला गया खैर, but he did hit the bucket list item. And I think just last year, I was just connecting with him, and we were going through that list, and we realized, what we did pretty much tick off every item that we put down there. We did. So I think it's more about, you do one thing, it will lead to another, it will lead to another, and eventually, I guess, you find your way into something. So he was the guy who was very kicked because he used to work in PR, and his company was handling the Foster's LOL Nights open mic. He was very excited. क्योंकि हम लोग compete भी करते थे in the Toastmasters humorous speech contest. So we competed also. He also saw me as an annoying competition. But he said, let's do this thing. He was very excited about it. He took me to the Cafe Goa open mic. The Cafe Goa open mic is India's first open mic. Okay, pretty much. Comedy open mic. All the big stars that you see today, हम लोग सब तभी ऐसे ही छोटे मोटे open mic. कोई वीडियो कुछ भी नहीं था. ठीक है, like the guys who you see as infallible, we were all just doing typical open mics there. In fact, on that
Like
open mic, he did better than me, I would say.
this
He
is
did.
like 2009, 2010,
Yes, this was
when
2000. Yes,
like before
2000.
YouTube was a big thing, and
Oh yes, yes. I do have a video on YouTube before YouTube was a big thing in 2010. So I did a remix version of "You Look Wonderful Tonight" called "High on Dope Tonight." Okay, and back then you had to put some image also, no, because YouTube does not let you put pure audio. तो ऐसे ही फालतू में मेरा इस्तांबुल ट्रिप का एक ऐसे ही photos video में पटका हुआ है. So it's there on YouTube and SoundCloud if anybody wants to check it out. But that was me doing YouTube way before its time. And in 2011, then he was part of the Foster's team that was organizing. So he told me, let's, go take part in that open mic. And all the big names you see today, all of them, all of us were competing today. I think Daniel, like so many people would serve. The whole gang was there. And I mean, one story I can share there is I went to the pub called Bonobo. And my friend, school batchmates, in fact, own it, actually. So I met him. I did not know this. He was surprised to see me doing. He said, "Oh, you come to see the comedy show." I said, "No, I've come to take part," and he could not believe it because like a बहुत serious आदमी कहाँ से comedy कर रहा है, And then I won it. And the craziest part is when he told me I work here. For a split second, I thought he's a serving staff there. I thought, okay, life has been challenging. Later on, I found out he. So we were both equally surprised at what happened and what are things happen in life at night. So I mean, यार चीजें ऐसे होती है. And then I was doing it on the side. I still didn't intend to take it very seriously, but I did get a cool line to drop on anybody I met. Hey, I'm an investment banker and a stand-up comedian. बोलने में तो बहुत cool लगता है ना यार फिर. Then things got challenging in 2012. My father's health started declining. I was about to get laid off from the investment banking job as well. And somehow one day before I was going to get laid off, for reasons I can never fathom, the promoter, he put me on the Thomas Cook deal. And I thought again, this is going to be a tough one. This is probably going to accelerate my exit. Instead, it went on to become the biggest open offer under the SEBI SAS regulations and the top 5 private equity deals of the year. And it is the deal that put Fairfax on the map, effectively in India, in public, essentially. So it helped to turn around things a lot. I can still recall July, I think it was 11, 2012. I got a slot in new stuff, in the comedy store. And new stuff is meant for established comedians, pro comedians who have made it. So somehow mujhe wo spot mil gaya. I was suddenly put in a different league, and this Thomas Cook deal was winding up towards the end, the open offer. So I knew that my job has been saved, by taking part and, pulling off something like this incredible. And open mic bhi acha gaya. Like there was that feeling of, ki yaar kuch hona chahiye life mein. And then I called a friend to hang out because I'm like, today if I go home alone, this will be really sad. This is something that needs to be sort of celebrated, and I think then my dad's health, it kept deteriorating over the period of time. It was challenging. And I remember there was one evening on September, I had another stuff on, spot on new stuff again. And that time I remember that my dad and mom both were unwell, and I was like, yaar, ye jaun ki iske liye nahi jaun. But something told me in instinct, this is going to be very important. And my boss was also creating a ruckus for me, फालतू में कोई लेट रुकाता ना आपको just because मजा आता है इसलिए करके. So the next day I had to skip my mom's doctor's appointment and somebody else had to go because he kept me waiting. But that evening went so well, and I met a friend, in fact, there, somebody whose wife I made fun of because she was in the front row. It was her birthday and they had a great time. The show went fantastic. I met them a year later, and they could not believe that it's the same guy who made fun of me, and now they are good friends, you know. So यार things मतलब होती है लाइफ में, you know, ऐसी चीजें. And फिर 2013 तक थे थोड़े challenges थे. My dad's health was again deteriorating a little bit, you know, and then little bit तो क्या मतलब काफी कुछ ही deteriorate हो गया. And there was this moment in 2013 where again I was out of the job, but on better terms. You know, now that I've closed this big deal and we've remained in touch, they've been very supportive, helped me out, congratulated me on a lot of things. I can share one side story in that open mic Foster's LOL, which I won. The finals was in Blue Frog. So Veerdas was again hosting it, and my CFO came to watch the show. The company was super excited about this. Like when I won that open mic, मेरे को किसी को नहीं बताना था, मैंने छुपा के रखा था. साला पेपर में ना बॉम्बे टाइम्स में फोटो वोटो छपे, ठीक है. तो मैं संडे को सो रहा हूँ और मस्ती में बॉस वॉस सबका एसएमएस आ रहा है, भाई तेरा फोटो पेपर आया. लाइक फक यार, ये तो लग गए. And the next day, the boss CEO called me into the cabin. I thought कोई deal discuss करनी, मैं notepad लेके गया. बोला नहीं ये side में रख, ये तू क्या करता है? He was fascinated. It was like a very new thing. You know? And the company newsletter also put a article का link, but in typical fashion, वो एक it was a link of about 2-3 sentences long. ठीक है? वो लोगों ने print किया है, तो वो कोई copy paste भी नहीं कर सकता. So if anybody wanted to view, he would have to physically type out a 3-sentence long URL, which I doubt anybody would have done. But you know, in 2013, it was much more challenging. All these things were happening, and then I found out कि मैं comedy store के lineup पे भी नहीं, you know, because apparently, you know, I was not on the pro lineup anymore. So I had to sort of do everything from scratch all over again. You know? So to me, it's not like comedy was a thing. I'm like, sure, you put me, you know, back to the wall with everything, you know, gone or whatever. ये life में यार बहुत बार देखा है. तो comedy नहीं तो कुछ ना कुछ और तो कर ही लेते थे. Frankly speaking, I mean, if you want to get the honest answer, I have seen such situations since childhood, frankly speaking. So for me, it's like you'll do whatever it takes. You know, okay, comedy takes will. Okay, you'll do whatever it takes. You know, and I would say it's partly genetic also. Like my father, he was gone in 1986 when I was 3 years old, you know, with a kidney failure, and he sort of literally with willpower he rose from it. Okay, मतलब literally बोलते हैं, he read Ayn Rand's Fountainhead twice when I was in self isolation after the transplant, और वो किताब पढ़ के भैया आदमी खड़ा हो गया वापस, ठीक है. तो मैंने यार ये चीजें देखी है लाइफ में. I've seen all these things. After he got up from that, he had no family support, कुछ भी नहीं था मतलब. And from there, then he was the first person to, you know, do fax machines and thermal paper in India. And in fact, there was an exhibition at the President Hotel in, I think, 88 or something like that, when the Tatas also had an office automation stall, okay? But when senior executives went to the Tata stall to ask for a live demo, they said, sir, live demo के लिए आपको पोदार फैक्स के पास जाना पड़ेगा. Live demo only they are able to provide. Even the Tatas could not provide that. And then he went on to be the first person to do FCNR bonds in India. Like, yeah, people like CK Prahlad and Rakesh Jhunjhunwala used to roam in my house, you know, when I was a child. I've grown up in that environment, you know, essentially. I was like, यार मैं वो वाला MBA नहीं हूँ कि लोगों ने बोला इसलिए career. I was brought up in this environment and I loved every bit of it. Okay, like so my dad, he went to BITS Pilani and IIM Ahmedabad from a small backward village. Okay, जहाँ पे कोई graduate ही नहीं करता, ठीक है. And he was the president of the Bombay chapter of the Alumni Association. So all the meetings used to happen in my house. You know, तो ये सारे management के, you know, CEOs, like all these people used to come here, and I've grown up, you know, essentially seeing those. I've seen the National Stock Exchange come up live in front of me. You know, like at the age of 11, I was telling, you know, uncles in my building कि online trading कैसे होती है. And I probably did the first few online trades in India as a child. Okay. गलती भी की थी, एक बाई के बदले सेल डाल दिया तो बहुत फट गई थी, लेकिन so yeah, for me it's like, sure, I mean, whatever it takes, you know, you will get there. And I think that sits well with comedy. If to answer your question, I know it's been a long digression, because what is comedy essentially, right? It is a merciless will to keep going, you know? The relationship between the audience and this thing now, obviously the comedian keeps a friendly vibe, but if you see an interview with Seinfeld, he says it is a contest. He's like, I will destroy you, you know. In some ways it is a contest, you know. If people are laughing, I'm not happy laugh. I'm like, okay, it's like, yes, I got that, yes, I got that. It's like a mental checklist. Okay, this one didn't work, I need to move, I need to shift, you know. So it's like what you have to do in life also, na? In under fire, when everything is like, dude, this thing, and everything is instant, right? You make one mistake, it is public, it is it is instant and there is no escaping it. You're all alone dealing with it. So I think that sort of sits well with somebody like me. For me, it's like, sure, it's a small subset of life. So I think it's something that I find easier to do. And comedy, I find, is probably the best way to deal with a lot of things, frankly speaking. So I think it's easier for me also to express, to be relatable. And as an introvert, I think possibly stand-up comedy is one of the best places where you'll be able to like, okay, guys, अब मैं बात करूंगा, ठीक है. और अभी मैं बात करूंगा और उसके बाद कोई बात नहीं करूंगा जितना टाइम डिसाइड किया तो ना कोई नई बात करने पे मुझे सुनेगा ना बात करने पे मुझे सुनाएगा. ये मेरा एरिया, ये मेरा अड्डा है, ठीक है. माइक मेरे हाथ में, तब तक मैं राजा. I think it's pretty. But आप लोग प्रजा भी है. You have to keep the praja happy, or else they will revolt also. So you have to sort of keep that in mind. And I don't want to stretch your bandwidth so much on one question, so I think we can move on to the next one.
So, I think most of the comedy as a professional stand-up comic is rehearsed. It's properly rehearsed. You have a content written for an hour or a 2 hour, and then you do a show, maybe a special, or maybe it's a live show. But what if so this is for me or Akshat when we re-enter the corporate world, or we just want to be funny in our normal life when we are having a cup of tea with friends. We just want to be funny. We not professional funny, but thoda sa funny. So how is it different? I know it is different because यहाँ पर आप rehearse करके you perform, and here it has to be more like a slapstick comedy or maybe something where you generally either you're genuinely funny or you're not. Is there a way out for someone like me who just wants to be funny, पर maybe just as a hobby, just as a real life friends दोस्तों के बीच?
Okay, so I would say I'll address this in two parts. The first is there's a fundamental difference between being funny to your group of friends versus doing stand-up comedy. The two things are fundamentally very different. You can be a brilliant stand-up comedian and yet be a completely silent guy in your friend group. Okay, the two things are not related at all. Likewise, lot of times अरे मेरा ये दोस्त बहुत funny है, ऑफिस में बहुत जोक्स, आप इसको stand up comedy करना, ये देख दो अलग चीज है, ठीक है. They are not this. It's like, see, those are people who know you. They have context. You don't have to set context, and at the same time, there's also a certain judgment that they already have of you. While here in stand-up comedy, I have to, in fact, I just see something, friends versus strangers, right? So exactly right? It is a bunch of total strangers with no context, right? When I walk in that room, let's presume you don't know me at all. I don't know that audience at all. I will not know them after that period also. But for those 2 hours, it's a living, breathing organism. Those 300 people in a canvas laugh club, the tech booth, the comedians who are sitting inside the green room, usually bitching about the other comedians only. And the person here, the guy who's outside, together we are one ecosystem that is making this whole show work. You think of it in that moment, we are a startup that has been created on the spot, but which has a shelf life of 2 hours. But we are a startup. Okay, I might be the CEO of that startup, but if those other people don't do their job, the show will fail. Like कितनी बार मैं show के बाद I used to talk to one of the owners, canvas का वो जो ऐसे घूमते रहते थे, managers and all, and he would tell me casually, हाँ मेरे को लगा कि आज ना थोड़ा break लंबा मैं सोचा कर देता हूँ क्योंकि ज़्यादा crowd है, तो break लंबा होएगा तो they'll be relaxed. If they had not done those things, people might be restless, and as an artist I might be यार लोग मतलब show अच्छा नहीं चल रहा है इसलिए लोग जा रहे हैं. Do you understand? There's a lot of things that play simultaneously in your mind, and I think we kind of create that whole ecosystem. It is a curated performance as opposed to when you're talking to your friends. See, like when we're talking right now, this is now, because of the world that we are in now, we are in a very interesting. Do you see this as a performance or as a conversation? Like I think that's a question I would like to ask you guys right now. How does it feel? Am I talking to you? Am I performing? I mean, what does this feel like, to you? Is something that I would love to hear from you, in fact, if that's okay.
This is more of a conversation, I believe, and that's
conversation, definitely.
But I see if it's like, see, I was in a clubhouse room also, I was hosting it, and there also I asked them, like, do you feel I'm talking to you right now? Am I being a speaker to you? Because that's a very dynamic. If you guys have used the app, it's a very dynamic space, where it's hard to tell, is it a podcast? Is it a conversation between people? Is it a small conference room? And it's seamless. It keeps sort of changing. So I think even to the comedian, he can change that definition if he chooses to. I can choose to make it seem like a personal conversation if I want to. I can suddenly, जैसे fourth wall बोलते हैं ना, there is a fourth wall in comedy is it's still there. There's an illusion, right? Since you mentioned that it's rehearsed, but I create an illusion that none of this is rehearsed, right? That all these are my actual thoughts.
Correct.
And you also buy that illusion. It is not really true. ये कोई चीज जो बोल रहा है literally ऐसा थोड़ी ना हुआ है, या जो सोच रहा है literally ऐसा नहीं सोच रहा है. But आप हंसते हो क्योंकि it's like magic. You buy into that illusion, and that's why you need all those things to create that illusion. The audience, the other people, you laugh because other people are laughing. So much of that is, which is why when comedians record YouTube videos, they see audience applause. अगर उस पे नहीं आ रहा है वीडियो पे, भले ही कितना अच्छा गया, तो वो शो नहीं जाता है, because we know the online audience is also having the same group thinking. They see other people laughing in the video, they will laugh, they think video बहुत अच्छा है, भले कि actually हंसी कहाँ से है नहीं आया. So it is to maintain that illusion essentially that you need to have that sort of differential. So to come back to your question here about how to do this, I would say, see, among friends, I would not say a stand-up comedian can tell you how to be funny among friends. Okay, I don't, because I was not that guy. I mean, frankly speaking, I was very serious, and I still am a pretty serious person. Okay, you will never mistake me for a comedian if you met me otherwise, frankly speaking. But when you're with friends, I think the only thing I can say what's worked for me in B school or anywhere else is that I'm a very, what I've been told is that I'm a very genuine person. I think if you're genuine, that is something that works as much in a personal conversation as in stand-up. I know it's a very contrived and be genuine, be yourself, but I think that will come from a place of when you're emotionally very open. Like if you've been doing a lot of things, if you've been exposed to a lot of emotional situations over a period of time, you understand how people feel about certain things. You will just be able to do the right things in that moment, whether it is cracking a joke or saying the right thing or just giving them a small compliment or anything of the sort. So I think it's more about that in the personal conversation space. Now, in terms of whether you can be funny at work, so that is something that I do professionally. I work so, like Duffin Phelps, the MD, he was giving a presentation on startup valuations to the young women of CFA. So you got startup valuation models, एक अलग ही दुनिया, एकदम super hardcore boring, hardcore modeling, and you got Gen Z people. Okay, how do we bloody bring these two together in a way that is sane? So I worked with him. I sat, we jammed, we came up with memes using Amitabh Bachchan and Abhishek Bachchan. Customer lifetime value जो रहता है e-commerce में, and Amitabh is asking Abhishek, where is my CLV, bro? Those kind of things that we, and in the process of jamming, we actually came up with insights into the market. We realized why the e-commerce aggregator model does not work in India. We actually came up with those kind of insights. That it's because of elasticity of price and people don't stick to a certain brand. So your customer acquisition cost that is there, you will never recover that over the customer lifetime value because the Indian customer is too fickle. कि यूएस वाला या 10 रुपए के लिए एक और अमेजोन आईडी नहीं खोलेगा जस्ट टू सेव दैट $10 कूपन टू बोला हाँ ठीक है. इंडिया में लोग सारा 3 जीमेल आईडी खोल लेंगे नेटफ्लिक्स के कूपन पे ₹3 बचाने के लिए, ठीक है, बिकॉज वी हैव नो वैल्यू फॉर आवर टाइम एसेंशियली. And that is the reason why that model doesn't work. Now, this came out of a discussion, not as a consultant. It was a discussion to make it funny. But when you get in that deep, because comedy goes to, I would ask him everything. Tell me more. Tell me more. How does it work? Tell me the formula. Tell me this. When you get to that level, then you're able to pull out insights. So that is something that can be done professionally in the corporate environment. And he told me that when I was making that presentation, it was heavy. It would dip. I could see every single time the joke meme came up, he said I could feel the audience and the energy lift again. So he was not a stand-up comedian. He was very much the MD of Duffin Phelps, giving very much a serious presentation on startup valuations and business models. But cracking those jokes actually helped to enhance his presentation. It did not diminish the topic or his stature in any way. So I think those are two, the personal conversation and this are two different tracks, but doing one can definitely help you with the other. It might be today be easier for me to slip a joke in a conversation because I do that as a muscle memory. That's it.
I had basically a question: how from a transition from a serious introvert, so basically to someone who can just go out in front of people, talk for like 30 minutes, doesn't that something give you anxiety? Or for me, if I have to talk to 30 minutes in front of like even 10 people, it'll be like I'll be filled with anxiety throughout the whole day. So how, I mean, did you come out of it?
So I can tell you this much. It's like, you put me on stage and I can talk to 10,000 people. Okay. But you put me in a green room, ना जैसे canvas के green room में जब भी 5 लोग से ज़्यादा हो जाते थे ना, I used to get very awkward. And if there were like 8 or 9 people, suddenly I'm out of the conversation altogether. Like I would struggle to be a part of conversations, as opposed to just outside में भी 300 लोग को बिंदास हंसा के आया. And here it's like as if I've suddenly turned into a different person. Same with Blue Frog, Comedy Store, wherever the venues where the green room and the auditorium, the stage is not segregated. Na? Those are very, very awkward spaces. आपने अगर bomb किया तो बहुत ही awkward है उस audience में वापस जाके बैठना. But अगर kill भी किया है ना तो भी there was a certain awkwardness. Like I remember Anup Pal would not even meet the audience. Like he would meet nobody after the show. He would refuse. Like green वाला नहीं मिल रहा है, बोला वो भाग गया. Like literally he's like he's left the venue. It was too much for him to meet people after the show, no matter how well his show has gone. So I think some of it is a little art. It's like you have that space, right? Which you have created, and now you're back to being an introvert. It's like that space. And this used to confuse me for years. I used to keep wondering. People used to ask me this question: how is an introvert doing stand-up comedy? I did not have a response. But sometimes your past helps you. Like a school friend of mine, he recently just came back from Canada. Ironically, we met at Bonobo again, because school friend, usse ke yahan pe get to. So maybe that place keeps giving me answers in life. So he told me, Vikram, say, I know you from childhood, right? When the conversation is structured, it's easy for you. Like then you can talk to people, then you can interact with people. So stand-up comedy or public speaking, it is structured in certain way, right? कि मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, लोग सुनेंगे. Prima facie, of course, you will have audience interaction, you will have a heckler, but a basic structure is sort of established. I know what I'm going to talk about, which otherwise is a big struggle for me. So for an introvert, sometimes doing stage performances can actually be easier than interacting with this. It's like I'll talk to those 3,000 people in Blue Frog, or 3,000 to nahi the Blue Frog mein khair, but bindas kar sakta hu. But off the stage, mingling with those people would have been a huge challenge. Over a period of time has changed, यार, क्योंकि थोड़ा क्या बोलते हैं ना यार, जिंदा रहने के लिए भी करना पड़ता है. Like after a show, I knew that I have a very limited halo. For a while, that halo, like, when I did a show for Cipla and Umang Vora, the CEO came back, said, Vikram, that's a good show, excellent. I know that's that and that moment he's treating me like an equal or maybe a little higher, but that's for 2 minutes. I have no delusion. He is conference mein, after a while, bhaiya, he's come for a conference. He has way more things on his mind. The employees also laughed and said, Vikram, amazing. After 5 minutes will go and they'll want to get their stage time with the CEO or with the other people. They're there to network. I'm still a novelty item, so I can't forget that. But I know that in that halo effect, I have to get business for the next time. So I would network mercilessly, talking to people. And the thing is, if the show has gone well, the one good thing was log khud aake baat kar lete the. Dude, good show. So that gives me an opening. It saves me that awkward opening thing, And then I would roam the halls mercilessly, talking to people, exchanging visiting cards. I would have this much of alcohol, fill it up all the way with water, and I would mercilessly walk the room, क्योंकि ये आज का शो तो हो गया, अगले बार का ना अभी से आपको pipeline create करना है. And in this halo is the best time in which you can exchange contacts with people. Then a mailing would go out to those people. Aditya Birla, I did a show for them in Thailand. I walked the room like mad. यार गिर के मतलब थक गया था मैं almost. But वो एक visiting card किसी के पास रह गया ना, so they reached out for a bigger event in Goa later on, where I was co-conceptualizing the event with them, for corporate finance, the awards, everything. We were sort of like consultants, built to suit, kaise bolte na, turnkey sort of solution, we gave it to them. That was because of that one visiting card that was left in the Thailand show, So, yaar, मतलब करना पड़ता है. Toastmasters also helped me a lot because I was a good speaker. People would come and talk. And then I took the role of VP membership where I had to go and interact with people. So through a mix of combination of things, that comfort, starts happening, which does not mean that I'm not still an introvert. I might still get very awkward in a group of people, if I cannot feel a way of connecting. Even my first few sessions on Clubhouse were very awkward. In fact, I used to start like this, guys, I'm a little awkward and this and that. In the 5th room, I think I joined, it was about say something, about yourself. And then I was about to say the same thing. And then I said, what, guys, I was going to start like this, that I'm nervous and this. And then I told myself, Vikram, that was you when you were 13 years old. It's been 25 years since you've come a long fucking way. Please own it and walk into that room like you own it. And then since then, I've been much more, कि ठीक है, अभी ये awkwardness Yeah, it's good. I like that awkwardness. It allows me to work on my own, keep my thoughts, and whatever, scan any threats on the horizon, all of that. But abhi, that comfort is there. I'll still be awkward in groups. Don't be surprised. But at least when it matters, I know that there I won't be awkward, even if it's a bad night. So I guess I'll take it.
Maybe a last few couple of questions before we finally conclude. Basically, a lot of us will go re-enter the corporate world and go to a consulting or go to a investment banking role. So you explain in your own way how will the life will be as a in any of these say a big four or maybe an investment company in your own funny way. But don't demotivate us and make sure that everyone goes your path.
Okay. And I think if you go my path, you will go down a very, very crazy path. Okay. I can assure you of that. Okay. See, what I can tell you is the consulting stint, how it's helped me. Okay. Yeah. I would just say, don't look at the job in that moment. Okay. How it will help you, you might know years later. The consulting firm I worked with, I was an undergraduate intern with them. Okay. I had worked with them as an undergraduate intern also, back in BMS when I was there. And I was one of the first, I think, undergrad interns they had hired. And I got retained for projects afterwards based on my performance. I worked on blood products there. The entry strategy for I think one of the biggest conglomerates, blood products. So things like plasma transfer, plasma pheresis, all these things I was already aware of. I knew back then that National Plasma Fractionation Center was the only place that did blood plasma. मैं जाके उनको मिला हूँ. All that knowledge is today helping me. Like I had done a project for a Saudi Arabian diagnostic laboratory, so I already knew about things like testing and all of these things. There was a guy who was excitedly saying, "Arey, I found a sample of swine flu," and I remember हम लोग दोनों consultants who were there on the project, we looked at each other and said, if this guy drops this test tube, we are both jumping straight out the window. Okay. And we were wearing full PPE suits, masks. You understand? We were already ready, and this was way back in 2009. So it and in 2007 I worked on a project, believe it or not, for one of India's biggest oxygen companies. And at that point, I knew every single cylinder of oxygen, demand and supply, including medical oxygen, kidhar hai, kahan aata hai, how you make all these plants, how. And today, that information, like if I had known last year, I would have just invested in the right oxygen companies because I know which companies also those are. That is my biggest regret that I missed out on that because I knew that oxygen is the key to this last year itself. Okay, I was chasing this. I was putting Twitter accounts. Early oxygen therapy is the key. Nobody cared, but I should have just put money in those stocks. So how it will benefit you don't know. And I would say my approach to comedy also is a lot like consulting. It is consulting ultimately is what about analogies. It's about finding comparables, right? You'll typically, especially if you get into a new industry altogether, you try to map to the most existing closest industry. For example, if blood products is something totally new, you will look at pharma as an overall representative. कि pharma में ऐसा होता है, these are the market structures, these are the distribution channels. So this is what you can use. And I think that thinking is a lot that is comedy, or especially corporate comedy, where you have to relate to very unrelated concepts like startup valuations or business models, or like if I'm doing a show for Nestle, I will take something about their branding practices and yet also ensure that the brand manager gives me future branding work also. So I have to sort of balance that out. And that's the same with investment banking. There's comparable benchmarks. How do you do? Like you'll typically look at listed multiples, or you will look at the nearest transaction multiples. So that process of comparing and pulling from different areas, I think that helps a lot. I got exposed to so many different industries in consulting and investment banking that it's easy for me to now create customized to context, whether it's humor or educational content for pretty much any industry, because you go to that deep level also, right? In investment banking, it's not just about the model. You also meet the promoters, you see the factories, you understand, parameters of their business. So that kind of learning, I think, is invaluable, but you don't know where it will get used. So I would say, go ahead, pursue consulting careers, do investment banking, but don't get caught up in ki mere ko partner ban. That might not be the path that you end up eventually going, then you'll end up in a small sort of window. Just see what you can take from it. So I have a stand-up bit called Ramayan, narrated by the investment banker, okay, which is a bit that I've done on ET markets, on ET now, global markets. And Mr. Ramdev Agarwal, who is the second in command at Motilal Oswal, he went outside, he came back inside the room to listen to it. I wrote this bit when I used to work in the investment bank. तभी मैं छुपा छुपा के लिख रहा था, alt tab करके कि boss नहीं देख ले कि क्या कर रहा है. Today it is supposed to be one of the best bits of financial comedy. I could not have done that if I was not in investment banking. And likewise, as a corporate comedian, when they mention on the profile, he's an MBA from FMS, he's, done like imagine that I'm performing for a bunch of, say, KKR, and they say he's the guy who did the Thomas Cook India buyout. I'm suddenly much more than a comedian to those guys, right? Now there's a different kind of respect. This guy does what we does, okay? Like, and that too at a certain, and he does this other thing that we cannot do. Or else there's a thing, nah, comedy to karta hai, we are, big private equity guys. But now suddenly you're breaking that, You are breaking an artificial thing that anybody could have over you. Like I can give you a specific example. I did a show for Motherson Sumi, they were doing some event for all their corporate bankers, mergers and acquisition, investment bankers. They're like, sir, बहुत सारी deal की हम party चाहिए. तो party दिया. Show बहुत अच्छा गया. Like imagine the caliber of the people in that room. Okay, like I met somebody afterwards, and he was some head of HSBC Global Markets or something, and I spoke to my batchmate who works in treasury and he said, do you know you just met my boss ka boss sort of thing. जिसको आप मिले उसका शायद नेटवर्क 100 करोड़ का है, ठीक है. And with him I'm chatting about ITC. Like he was telling me कि हाँ ITC बुखारा बहुत महंगा है. He was probably humoring me. That guy could probably, I don't know, take a stake in Bukhara if he wanted to. But the best part is somebody was interacting with me and they said, do you see all the guys dressed in suits? They are the bankers. You see that guy जो खाली half sleeve shirt पहन के ऐसे बिंदास खड़ा है ना, he's the promoter and the owner of the company. And I think that to a certain extent is what comedy allows you to do. You can be that guy, even in a half sleeve and shorts, and you can still be and have the confidence and ownership like you're the owner of a company. I think that is, I think, something that gives a lot of perspective to why you do certain things. If that addresses your question, or I've gone way off this thing, I have no idea, to be very honest. Does that address your query?
I think it does. So that concludes our time here.
Fantastic.
So on behalf of the PGPBL class of 2022 and the BL Insight Circle, we thank Mr. Vikram Poddar for taking his time to enlighten us on his path of change from consulting to a humor resource manager, from making checklists, following your path, making connections, and owning the room, and onto what to expect in consulting and in investment banking. A humorous take on serious boardroom trainings and impact of humor in our serious lives. We, as the class, will definitely try to take the humorous route to the board meetings. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Just want to leave one last thing. You can follow me on Instagram at Vikram Poddar Comedian. LinkedIn and Facebook is Vikram Poddar. Twitter @BoredRoom Comedy. That's BORED. So feel free to reach out. I'm also there on Clubhouse if anybody, I conduct different sessions. What is comedy? I also touch upon investment banking, consulting, or, general career advice or financial advice. So anything, if anybody wants to reach out, or please feel free to do so, because I guess you guys are the future. Okay. And I'm very happy to stay connected with the future to secure mine, okay, frankly speaking. And it was as much my pleasure to do this, and I'm glad you gave me this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Take care, guys.